What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Hopefully your year started good. There's a lie that Vladimir Putin repeats with almost religious discipline. A lie so polished, so overused that even people who no longer trust him still hear it echoing in their heads. And this lie is very simple. Sanctions do not work, he says. Russia is strong, Russia is self-sufficient, Russia can survive on its own. Western companies can leave, Western markets can close, Western money can disappear, no problem, we don't need them. According to the Kremlin, sanctions are nothing more than just a mild inconvenience, just a temporary annoyance, a symbolic gesture by declining West that does not fully understand Russia's true resilience. And for years, many people wanted to believe this, including Putin himself, who eventually did believe his own lie. But here is the thing about economic reality. It does not care about speeches, televised monologues, patriotic slogans. It does not respond to confidence or denial. It responds to structure, incentives, competition, and time. And time is exactly where sanctions become lethal. Any country's economy is just a bunch of numbers. It's a math, simple as that. And once numbers do not add up, the whole equation collapses. You cannot do anything about it. 2 plus 2 never will be 5. So today, let's talk about why Putin lies about sanctions, why they absolutely do matter, and why the damage they have done to the Russian economy is not temporary, not cosmetic, and not reversible without pain so severe that the Kremlin itself is terrified to even acknowledge it. Putin's favorite economic fairy tale has always been the idea of Russia as a fortress. A country so vast, so resource-rich, so historically hardened, that it can simply shut the gates and live happily ever after. Iron Curtain 2.0. No imports needed, no foreign technology required, no global integration necessary, nothing. Just oil, gas, steel, wheat, and patriotism, a lot of it. The narrative has deep roots. It plays perfectly into imperial nostalgia and Soviet memory, where hardship is reframed as virtue and isolation as strength. But the modern Russian economy was never a fortress. It was a pipeline that exported raw materials and imported everything else that made modern life function. The first real test of this illusion came in 2014 after the annexation of Crimea. Sanctions back then were mild to comparison to what we see today. But even those early measures immediately exposed how dependent Russia was on global supply chains. Entire categories of products quietly disappeared from the shelves. What used to be a choice between 10 or 15 brands suddenly became just 5, sometimes 3, sometimes 1. Best case scenario. Well, and here is the key detail. Competition vanished as a result. When competition vanishes, power concentrates. Prices stop reflecting efficiency and start reflecting greed. That's just how basic monopoly works. Most of the companies that filled the gaps were Russian. And most of those companies were either owned by oligarchs, controlled by oligarchs, or politically dependent on oligarchs. And those oligarchs, as you might imagine, do not exist to provide affordable, high-quality goods to the population. No. Their first priority is their own enrichment. Their second priority is loyalty to the regime that protects them and allows them to do it. The consumer does not even make the list. Just make something at least acceptable and, well, that's all that matters. It's not like people have a choice anyways, right? So prices went up, quality stagnated at best and declined at worst, but officially everything was fine. Putin smiled, Central Bank of Russia published optimistic numbers, television explained that the Russians were simply rediscovering domestic products, that we are apparently best in producing cars, I don't know. And the myth survived, kinda, at least temporarily. But then came February 2022, the invasion. Sanctions, consequences, devastation skyrocketed. So let's talk about it in more details now in our next chapter. February 2022 shattered whatever illusion remained. The invasion of Ukraine triggered sanctions on a scale Russia has never experienced. Not symbolic restrictions, not selective pressure. This was systemic isolation. Financial sanctions, technology bans, logistics breakdowns, corporate exits, insurance restrictions, shipping constraints, and, well, the effect was obviously immediate. Russia became the most sanctioned country in the world, surpassing countries like Iran or North Korea. Prices exploded almost overnight, not because goods suddenly became more expensive to ship, produce, or deliver, obviously not, but because uncertainty is the poison for the markets. If you guys, some of you are investors, you know what I mean. Businesses did not know what they would be able to import next month, how they would pay for suppliers, or whether their logistics chain would even survive another week at all. And here is where the lie becomes structural. When producers realized that people were still paying higher prices, not because they wanted to, but because they absolutely had no alternative, no choices, well, guess what? There was zero incentive to lower them again. Why would they? People paid the price, so that's it, just keep it. Competition was gone, imports were restricted, the consumer was trapped. Inflation stopped being just a temporary shock and just became baked into daily reality, into daily life. And well, the Kremlin responded with its favorite tool, fake stability. Numbers adjusted, methodologies changed, baskets recalculated, official inflation figures departed completely from lived reality. They say it's 7%, in reality it's like 27%, easily. At the same time, the economy itself split in two. If you are connected to the multi-industrial complex, life improved. Salaries surged, bonuses multiplied, entire regions became dependent on war production. Drone factories, ammunition plants, logistics hubs, this was where money flowed. But if you're outside that bubble, your purchasing power collapsed. The message was clear: adapt to war or fall behind. And that kind of distortion does not heal, it hardens. It locks the economy into a single purpose. Once people are making hundreds of thousands of rubles assembling drones, they will never accept earning a fraction of that assembling refrigerators or cars. Ladas, I don't know, like Niva, whatever. The war economy is not just an economic model, it's a social trap. It's so easy to put a country on military tracks, but it is almost impossible to bring it back without derailing the whole train. And just when the regime of Putin thought that they kind of accepted and adapted it to a new reality, a sudden realization of collapsing oil markets entered their everyday discussions. Let's now us guys talk about it in our next chapter. Now let's talk about oil. Because oil is the spine of the Russian economy and, well, sanctions did not break that spine, they just bent it, at least for now, in a humiliating position. After 2022, most Western markets closed their doors to the Russian energy. Not completely at first, but decisively over time. Suddenly Russia was left with just two major buyers, you know them, China and India. And here is where Putin's rhetoric completely collapses. Because markets are not friendships, they are power relationships. China and India know perfectly well that they are the last major buyer standing. They know Russia has no alternatives. They know pipelines can't be redirected overnight and tankers just cannot teleport magically. Well, just like oligarchs cornered people previously with limited choice and higher prices, and just look how tables turned now. So China and India are the only ones to dictate the price now. Russia sells oil at massive discounts, not out of generosity, but out of necessity. Every barrel sold is sold on somebody else's terms. Every contract reflects this weakness, and no amount of propaganda can hide that reality. You could call it pivoting east, you can call it new partnerships or strategic realignment, but economically speaking, it's just dependency. And dependency always flows one way. China and India does not need Russia nearly as much as Russia needs them. And that imbalance is permanent as long as sanctions remain. Even worse, these discounted sales starve the budget. Less revenue per barrel means less money for everything else. Infrastructure, healthcare, education, civilian industry, and obviously the war. It's not like Putin will ever compromise the war, he better close schools, but you get it. So the state compensates by squeezing the population harder now. Taxes rise quietly, fees multiply, social spending stagnates, and once again, officially everything is stable. And officially the economy is cannibalizing itself to keep the war alive. Everything outside military sector shrinks to oblivion. Entire industries become worthless and lacking of people. And the economy is more and more firmly planted on these war tracks that lead completely into nowhere. Here's the part Putin never addresses. Sanctions do not just damage economy today, they corrupt its future. Entire sectors rot when cut off from global competition and innovation. Technology gaps widen, skills atrophy, management culture degrades. And once broken, supply chains do not magically reassemble themselves. Inflation does not disappear because central bank publishes nicer charts and just says that inflation is not that high. Trust does not return because a president declares a victory of economic reality. The Russian economy is now structurally distorted. War wages have replaced productivity, loyalty has replaced efficiency, monopoly has replaced competition, and this creates wounds that do not heal naturally. Bringing things back to normal would require massive interventions. Currency shocks, it will require budget cuts, industrial restructuring, all these kind of things. Social pain on a scale the Kremlin just simply cannot politically survive, basically. So instead, Putin lies. He pretends the patient is healthy while quietly pumping adrenaline to keep the heart beating. But adrenaline is not a cure, it's just a delay. And every delay makes the eventual crash worse. People will not suddenly accept lower wages. China and India will not suddenly pay more for oil out of kindness, out of friendship. Domestic monopolies will not voluntarily lower prices. The system is locked into decline. Not dramatic collapse tomorrow, but slow, grinding, 100% failure. And that is the most dangerous kind, because it forces the regime to choose between admitting the truth or doubling down on repression to silence it. Putin lies about sanctions because the truth is politically fatal. Sanctions matter because they attack the foundation of power, not the surface. They do not need to cause immediate chaos to be effective. They need time. And time is something Russia no longer controls. The economy has been poisoned at its core. You can break things quickly, you can start wars easy, but restoring trust, competition, and normalcy takes years. It also requires leadership, willing to admit the failure, but, well, Kremlin has neither. Definitely not the second one. I mean, imagine Putin going out and saying, "Sorry guys, I was wrong." What we're watching now is not resilience, it's denial. And denial in economics always ends the same way. Not with a bang, but with a long, painful cardiac arrest that no amount of propaganda can ever resuscitate. Well, there you have it, guys. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. Happy New Year. If you wish to support our work, the links down below. For example, PayPal donations. Thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims are resolve they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe in